Hi guys, so today we are going to discuss a very new topic once again. This is from otorhinolaryngology, that is ENT subject, vestibular system. That vestibular system which helps us to maintain balance, posture and awareness in body position as we move. So such an important topic we are going to discuss today. In this session, it will include basics of vestibular system like what is the composition, then parts and basically more details about the composition. Then we will go to the physiology, and lastly we will go to the disorders of vestibular system and also discuss about the assessment of vestibular system if time permits. So first let's start with the basic introduction about vestibular system. So vestibular system is part of inner ear and brain that helps us maintain balance, posture and awareness in body position as we move. It helps in keeping balance when standing or walking, maintaining stable vision when head moves, consciousness of head and body position, and coordination between head and body movement. Now we will understand about the composition of vestibular system, in which there are two type of receptors. There are peripheral receptors and there are afferents and efferents, and the vestibular nerve and the cerebellum. So basically the two type of peripheral receptors are crista and maculae. Crista location is in the amputated end of three semicircular ducts, and maculae are present in the otolith organs like utricle and saccule. This crista function as it senses angular acceleration and deceleration, and macula senses the position of head in gravity, linear acceleration and deceleration, and also in head tilt movements. Now we will discuss about the structure of cresta. So as you can see in this diagram, cresta is present at the ampullary end of the semicircular duct. That is, this is the semicircular duct and here is the ampullary end, and the cresta are present over here. So cresta is basically a crest-like mound of connective tissue on which lies the sensory epithelial cells. So it is a crest-like mound and these are the sensory epithelial cells, and the cilia of the sensory epithelial cells project into the cupula. This is the cupulas, as you can see over here, cupulas, and the cilia, as you can see over here, these are the cilia. So cilia, and that's the cupula, they project into the cupula. What is cupula? Cupula is basically an gelatinous mass which extends from the surface of crista, that is the surface of crista, to the ceiling of the ampulla, and they form a watertight partition only to be displaced from one side to other like a swinging door by the movement of endolimb. And basically it is made up of a gelatinous mass which consists of polysaccharides, then and it contains canals into which the projections of cilia of sensory cells occur. So basically the hair cells, those are of two type, as we can see over here. Two type of hair cells are present. Type 1 is a flask type of hair shape, and second one is a cup like type of hair cell, which is also called as a type 2. So basically flask or cup like, and type 2 is cylindrical with multiple nerve terminals, and that is you can see over here, and it is cup like or flask like which contains only one nerve terminal, and from the upper surface of each cell projects a single hair which is called as a kinocilium. So as you can see, that's a single hair called kinocilium, and a number of other cilia which are called as a stereocilia. And also the sensory cells are surrounded by supporting cells which shows microvilli at their upper end. So as you can see, these are the supporting cells which have shown microvilli at the upper end. So that's the basic structure of cresta. Now we will discuss about the structure of a macula. Macula contains mainly of two parts. One is a sensory neuroepithelium which is made up of type 1 and type 2 hair cells. As you can see, type 1 of hair cells and type 2 hair cells. It is a sensory neuroepithelium, as you can see over here. And the next one is basically an autolytic membrane, which is made up of a gelatinous mass, and on the top of it are crystals of calcium carbonate called as otoliths. So this is the autolytic membrane, crystals of calcium carbonate. And that's the basic structure of macula. Then we'll move to vestibular nerve. Vestibular nerve or the Scarpa's ganglion is situated in the lateral part of internal acoustic meatus. It consists of bipolar cells. The distal process of bipolar cell innervate the sensory epithelium of the labyrinth, while the central process aggregate to form the vestibular nerve. Now, as we can see that the vestibular nerve end in vestibular nuclei. There are four types of vestibular nuclei. Those are superior, medial, lateral, and descending. The afferent to these nuclei are peripheral vestibular receptors, cerebellum, reticular formation, spinal cord, and contralateral vestibular nuclei. And the efferents are nuclei of cranial nerve 3, 4, 6, motor part of spinal cord, cerebellum, autonomic nervous system, opposite side of vestibular nuclei, and cerebral cortex. Also, it is important to note that the cranial nerve 3, 4, and 6 are important in this case for genesis of nystagmus. Vestibulospinal fibers coordinate movement of head, neck, and body. Then also maintenance of balance. Vestibulocerebellar coordinate input information for maintenance of body balance. And also autonomic nervous system responsible for nausea, vomiting, palpitation, sweating, and pallor. And temporal lobe for subjective awareness of motion. So that was about basic structural anatomy of vestibular system. Now we will move to physiology of vestibular system. So vestibular system is divided into peripheral and central. Peripheral consists of membranous labyrinth, whose parts are semicircular canals plus utricle plus saccule. These together are also known as otolith organ and vestibular nerve. And centrally nuclei, those four nuclei we discussed, and fiber tracts, as we discussed that vestibulocerebellar fibers, vestibulospinal fibers, temporovestibular fibers, temporoautonomic fibers. So these all fibers come in the central part. We will discuss now in detail about semicircular canals. In total, 3 semicircular canals are present, and all of them are at right angle to each other. We can name them as, for layman terms, like vertical, horizontal, or posterior canals, and they are present at right angle to each other. And you have to understand that when the vertical canal movement takes place in the horizontal plane, there is a maximum response. That is, if in the posterior canal movement takes place, then maximum response will be there in the horizontal and the vertical, and if horizontal canal, maximum movement in the posterior. Similarly, it works in this mechanism. And nystagmus means involuntary jerky movement of eye in any plane, horizontal, up, to and fro, rotatory. Basically, that direction of nystagmus is dependent on the plane which is stimulated. That is, the vertical semicircular canal stimulates the rotatory movement, horizontal semicircular canal stimulates the horizontal movement, and the posterior semicircular canal stimulates the vertical movement of eye. That is, vertically nystagmus can be identified. Also, it is important to know, as we discussed, that the cupula moves like a swinging door according to the movement of endolymph. So basically, endolymph move towards the cupula. That movement is called ampulopetal, and if it moves away from the cupula, that movement is called as a ampulofugal. So we have two components of nystagmus. One is quick, one is slow. Quick component is basically for rapid corrective movement of the eye in case of altered eye movement. That's some brain attempt to clear the slow jerk. And slow component is basically initial movement of eye, which is called by vestibular imbalance. We have to understand that quick component of nystagmus direction is always opposite to direction of the flow of endolymph. Slow component nystagmus is in the direction of the flow of endolymph. A better example to understand this is if a person is rotated towards the right for some jerky time, like for some time, then the flow of endolymph will continue towards the right due to inertia, and then it will stop finally. Moment is toward the right, but the nystagmus plane moment opposite direction of the flow of endolymph, nystagmus will take basically to the left side, and this comes under quick component of nystagmus, and slow component of nystagmus, it will be in the same direction as of endolymph. Disorders of vestibular system now discussing. We have divided into two disorders, peripheral and central disorder. Peripheral disorders are those disorders which affect basically the lesions of the end organs vestibular nerve, and central are the lesions of brainstem and central connections. We have these disorders like Meniere's disease, benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, vestibular neuronitis, labyrinthitis. Then we have vestibular toxic drugs, head trauma, perilymph fistula, syphilis, acoustic neuroma. And in central we have vertebro-basilar insufficiency, posterior inferior cerebellar artery syndrome, basilar migraine, cerebellar disease, multiple sclerosis, tumors of brainstem and fourth ventricle, epilepsy and cervical vertebra. So the first disorder we are going to discuss is Meniere's disease, also known as endolymphatic hydrops. It is characterized by tinnitus, sense of pressure in involved ear, vertigo, fluctuating hearing loss. Yes, that's the pictorial representation. Endolymph in the vestibular system, endolymph in the cochlea, and perilymph. So basically that's called endolymphatic hydrops. Here the vertigo involved is of sudden onset, lasts for a few minutes, and also can last up to 24 hours or so. Next one is benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. Benign paroxysmal positional vertigo topic is important because it is characterized by vertigo when the head is placed in certain critical position. Your importance is there is no hearing loss or other neurologic symptoms, and positional testing establishes the diagnosis and helps to differentiate from positional vertigo. Disease mainly etiology is posterior semicircular canal disorder, though many patients have history of head trauma and ear infection, and also demonstrate has been done about otocorneal debris consisting of crystals of calcium carbonate, as we have seen in the otoliths, and release from the degenerating macula of the utricle and float freely in the endolymph. So basically, as mentioned here, etiology being this and your trauma infection characteristics. The autoconical debris released from the degenerating macula of utricle, it floats freely into the endolymph. Then it in critical head position, it settles on the cupula of posterior semicircular canal, and then it causes a displacement of cupula plus fatigable vertigo. So that's basically how the pathology or mechanism of benign paroxysmal positional vertigo is. We can confirm the diagnosis by correct history and Hall-Picke maneuver. That's for establishing diagnosis, and for treatment we use Epley's maneuver. Now we are going to see in detail about Epley's maneuver. The main motive of Epley's maneuver is to reposition the autoconical debris from the posterior semicircular canal back to the utricle. So for this, the doctor has to stand behind the patient and the assistant on the side. The patient is made to sit on the table so that when he is made to lie down, his head is beyond the edge of the table, as in the index Hall-Picke maneuver. His face is turned 45 degrees to the affected side. And now this maneuver consists of 5 positions. The first position being the patient sitting facing forward. Second, the patient is laying down in Dick's Hall-Picke position with head hanging and turned around 45 degree to the right, that is the affected ear. Then head turned to left in Dick's Hall-Picke position with affected ear up, that's the position number C, as you can see. And then D, where the head and body both are turned as a unit to the affected side so that the face is turned to the ground. And the last one, that is patient is made to sit with the head bent forward 20 degree. So in this way, basically the otolith that is autoconical debris is taken back from posterior semicircular canal to the utricle. As you can see, that's the posterior semicircular canal, and in this way it's being taken back to the utricle. Next disorder is vestibular neuronitis, in which there is a vertigo of sudden onset with no cochlear symptom. Attack may last from 2 to 3 weeks. Virus may attack ganglia and is self-limiting. Then we have labyrinthitis, in which there is a circumscribed labyrinthitis, diffuse serum labyrinthitis. Then we have diffuse suppurative labyrinthitis. In circumscribed labyrinthitis, there is thinning of bony capsule of labyrinth, usually horizontal semicircular canal. Etiology being chronic suppurative otitis media with cholesteatoma, the neoplasm of middle ear carcinoma or glomertia, surgical or accidental trauma. What is cholesteatoma? It is basically a destructive and expanding growth consisting of keratinizing squamous epithelium in the middle ear or the mastoid process. Those are not cancerous, but they cause significant problems such as circumscribed labyrinthitis. Then we have serous labyrinthitis. Etiology is again trauma or invasion adjacent to ear, but without actual invasion, which is actually invasion by some carcinoma or cholesteatoma or surgical or accidental trauma. Here invasion occurs, but in this case there is no actual invasion. Then associated with severe vertigo and sensorineural hearing loss. Purulent labyrinthitis, vertigo due to acute vestibular failure, and nystagmus is seen to opposite side due to destruction of affected labyrinth. Then in others, we have vestibulotoxic drugs that affect the cochlear and vestibular labyrinth, like aminoglycoside, which affect crista ampullaris, head trauma, which causes concussion of labyrinth, disruption of bony labyrinth and eighth nerve, cause perilimb fistula. Severe acoustic trauma, which lead to vestibular or otolite disturbance, can cause also vertigo. Syphilis of inner ear dizziness plus sensorineural hearing loss. Hennebert's sign, which is positive fistula test in presence of intact tympanic membranes in congenital syphilis. Then next is acoustic neuroma tumor, which arises from 8th cranial nerve within the internal acoustic meatus. Now let's discuss about central vestibular disorders. The clinical features are basically in patient above 50 years of age. Vertigo is abrupt onset lasting for several minutes, associated with nausea, vomiting. Neurological symptoms are visual disturbances, drop attacks, hemiparesis, dysphagia, hemianopia, that is partial blindness, and diplopia, that is blurred vision and double vision. Then basically etiology being ischemia, which is due to hypotension, pressure on vertebral arteries and cervical osteophytes, that is decrease in cerebral blood flow. What are the complaints? Intermittent attack of vertigo and lateral rotation and extension of head. Then we also read about one more central vestibular disorder. It is posterior inferior cerebral artery syndrome. This syndrome is associated with violent vertigo with diplopia, dysphagia, hoarseness, Horner syndrome, and Horner basically syndrome with sensory loss on ipsilateral side and contralateral side of the body. Next is basilar migraine, 50 to 60 minute lasting vertigo, which is abrupt. Most common cause being in adolescent girl with strong menstrual relationship plus family history. Other causes being cerebral diseases, multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, tumors of brainstem, and floor of fourth ventricle. Next we have cervical vertigo. Vertigo may follow injuries of neck 7 to 10 days after accident, provoked by movement of neck to side of injury due to disturb vestibulobasilar circulation, involvement of sympathetic vertebral plexus, alteration of tonic neck reflexes. Other causes include basically ocular vertigo and psychogenic vertigo.